Age has a funny way of revealing the truth about people. When you're young, love feels loud. It's hugs, laughter, and phone calls that never seem to end. But when you're old, love goes quiet. It becomes the kind of silence you wait for, hoping someone remembers to fill it. I used to sit on my porch every Sunday, watching the road that led to my house. The same road my grandchildren once ran down with sticky fingers and wild smiles. They used to scream, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" like I was the whole world. Back then, their laughter filled the house so completely that even the old walls seemed younger. But as the years rolled on, those visits grew fewer, the phone calls shorter, until one day I realized that the only time they came by was when they needed something: money, help with rent, a new car, a temporary loan that was never really temporary. You might be wondering, why did I keep giving? Why not say no? Well, when you love someone that much, you don't count the times you give. You just do it, believing that maybe next time they'll show up because they care, not because they need. I remember one afternoon when my youngest granddaughter, Emily, called me after months of silence. Her voice was sugar sweet. "Grandpa, how are you?" And before I could even answer, she added, "I was wondering if you could help me out with something." She needed $2,000, and she promised she'd pay me back in a week. She didn't. She never does. But what hurt wasn't the money. It was the fact that the moment I said yes, she hung up. "No, how have you been?" "No, I miss you." Just click. That night, I sat in the quiet staring at the empty kitchen table. 4 chairs, but only one ever used. I still set plates for everyone out of habit. A part of me hoped maybe, one Sunday, they'd surprise me again. You know what's funny? The only person who ever noticed the empty plates was Maria, my maid. She's been working for me for nearly 15 years now. Short woman, always humming some tune while she cleaned. She'd see the table and quietly put away the extra plates, pat my shoulder, and say, "They'll come when their hearts are ready." And every time she said that, I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I knew those hearts had turned cold. A few months later, I ended up in the hospital. Nothing serious, just a scare. The doctor said it was dehydration and stress. When I woke up in that hospital bed, guess who was sitting beside me? Not my children, not my grandchildren. It was Maria. She was holding my hand, whispering prayers in Spanish, and I remember this moment so clearly. I looked around the room and thought, this is what family looks like. When I got back home, I decided to test something. I didn't tell anyone I was discharged, not a word. I wanted to see if any of them would call to check in. A day passed, then 2. Then a week, nothing. But Maria, she brought me soup every day after work, sat with me while I watched my favorite westerns. She even fixed my old radio because she noticed I kept trying to tune it. And every time she left, she'd say, "Don't worry, Senor. Tomorrow I'll bring you something sweet." I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between those quiet evenings and her small acts of kindness, I realized she cared more than my own blood. One Sunday, I tried calling my daughter, Anna. She didn't pick up. I tried again the next day. Same result. Finally, I left a voicemail. "Honey, I just wanted to hear your voice. It's been a while." She never called back, but the next week, her son, my grandson, texted me. Not to ask how I was doing, of course. He said, "Hey, Grandpa, can you Zelle me $500? My car broke down." I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Sure, son. Send me your account." And I sent it. Not because he deserved it, but because I was too tired to fight for affection anymore. Later that night, Maria noticed something was off. She said, "You look heavy, Senor. Not in your body, como in your heart." I smiled weakly and said, "Maria, have you ever felt like the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest?" She didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, holding my hand. No fancy advice, no empty words, just presence. And sometimes that's all an old man needs. The next morning I opened my drawer where I kept all my important papers, the will, the deeds, the bank documents. I looked at them for a long while, and for the first time in years, a thought came that I couldn't ignore. Maybe love isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who shows up when it matters. I didn't act on it right away. I wanted to be sure, so I waited, watched, observed. The next few months confirmed everything I already knew. My family came and went like passing shadows, showing up when they needed something, disappearing when I didn't. But Maria? She was consistent. Rain or shine, she showed up. One evening, I overheard her talking to her daughter on the phone. Her daughter wanted to quit school because they couldn't afford tuition. Maria tried to reassure her, saying, "Don't worry, mija. God will make a way." Her voice cracked, but she held it together. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about how I'd spent my life giving to people who only saw me as an ATM, while the one person who truly cared was struggling quietly. The next morning, I called my lawyer. He sounded surprised. "Mr. Johnson, it's been a while." "Everything all right?" I said. "I think it's time I make some changes." He asked, "Changes to what, sir?" And I replied, "To everything." When I hung up the phone with my lawyer, I sat there for a long while, staring out the window. The sun was low, painting the trees gold, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I just felt done. Done hoping. Done waiting for love to come from where it never would. The next morning, my lawyer came by. He's been with me for 25 years, a good man named Harris. Patient, discreet, the kind of person who doesn't flinch at big decisions. He walked in, gave me that familiar half-smile, and said, "So, what's this all about?" I told him everything. About Maria, about the loneliness, about the years of pretending I didn't notice my family only came around when they wanted something. He listened quietly, nodding here and there, letting me empty the whole weight of it. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," I said. "I don't want my money to reward greed. I want it to honor kindness." He gave me a slow nod. "All right then, we'll draw up the changes. You understand, this might cause some tension." I chuckled, a dry sound. "Harris, my family already forgot I exist. I think we passed the point of tension years ago. That night, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. But there was a strange ache, too, the ache of finally letting go of something you spent years holding on to. A few days later, Maria came in to clean as usual. She noticed the lawyer's business card on the table. "Everything okay, senor?" she asked. "Just some paperwork," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm putting my affairs in order." She frowned a little. "You're not sick again, are you?" No, I said, just making sure everything's taken care of. "You know, old man stuff," she laughed softly. "You're not old, just seasoned." That word stayed with me. Seasoned. There's a certain grace to it. Like the way wood darkens with age, becoming stronger, more beautiful in its cracks. Weeks passed. The will was finalized. Maria's name was there, clear as day. The house, a chunk of savings, the car she always admired but never asked for. Harris told me, "You want to keep this confidential until it's time?" "Yes," I said. "Let them see who truly mattered when I'm gone." And just like that, my quiet rebellion began. A month later, Anna finally called. "Dad, we've been meaning to visit. Things have just been crazy busy." I smiled to myself. Busy is good. What's new? "Oh, not much," she said, and then quickly added, "Actually, we've been looking at a new house, but the mortgage is killing us. I was wondering if you could help us bridge the down payment." Just this once, there it was. The same old pattern, rehearsed so well, I could almost mouth the words along with her. I told her gently, "Sweetheart, I think you should talk to the bank about adjusting your payments." "I'm not sure I can help this time." Silence. Then that icy tone I knew too well. "Wow, Dad, okay. I didn't realize things were that bad." "No," I said softly. "Things are actually better than ever." She hung up soon after. Maria came in later that afternoon and found me sitting by the window, smiling faintly. She didn't ask what happened. She just brought me tea, set it beside me, and said, "You look peaceful today." I said, "Maria, do you ever think people get what they deserve in the end?" She paused. "Sometimes, but mostly, I think they get what they give." That night I wrote those words in my journal. People get what they give. Days turned into weeks. Life returned to its slow rhythm. Morning walks, old westerns, Maria humming through the house. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't wait for calls anymore. I didn't flinch when the doorbell didn't ring. I just lived. One afternoon, while pruning the roses out front, my neighbor George wandered over. He's about my age, sharp as ever. He leaned on the fence and said, "You've been quiet lately, Johnson. Everything all right?" I nodded. "More than all right. Just making peace with the past," he chuckled. "Ah, that stage of life, huh? I did that too. Burned a few old letters, stopped waiting for people who'd already left. Feels good, doesn't it?" I asked. "The best," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "You know, you always treated that maid of yours like family." "I respect that," I smiled. "She earned it. She's the only one who never left," he nodded knowingly. "Sometimes blood isn't thicker, it's just louder." That line made me laugh. Because he was right. As the months passed, Maria's visits became more than work. She'd sit with me after dinner, tell me stories about her childhood in Mexico, how her mother taught her to cook by candlelight, how she'd sneak mangoes from the neighbor's tree. Her laughter filled the house the way my grandchildren's once did. One evening she came in looking pale. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, then said, "It's my daughter. She's sick. They say she needs an operation." I saw the worry in her eyes, that deep, helpless fear only a parent knows. "Do you have enough for it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, senor, but I'll find a way. I always do." I didn't say anything right away. But the next morning, I called Harris. "Can you arrange a transfer for Maria's daughter's surgery?" "Anonymous." "Of course," he said. "How much?" "Enough," I said. "Make sure she never has to choose between her child's health and her dignity." When Maria found out a week later that the hospital bill had been paid, she came to me in tears. "Senor, did you—" I just smiled and said, "Maybe someone up there decided you'd earned a little grace." She cried, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "You're a good man." But I wasn't. Not really. I was just trying to set things right, in my own quiet way. It was late autumn when the phone calls began again. The kind of days when the sky turns gray before noon and the air smells faintly of wood smoke. I'd just settled into my armchair with a book when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. "But old habits die hard, Grandpa," a bright, sugary voice said. It was Megan, my eldest granddaughter, the one who hadn't called me in almost 2 years. "I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling these days?" I smiled to myself. "Still kicking," I said. "What's got you remembering your old granddad today?" She laughed awkwardly. "Oh, you know, family. I was telling Daniel we should come visit soon." "Daniel?" I asked. "My fiancé," she said, and her tone grew sweeter, like honey hiding something sour underneath. "He's in real estate now, doing really well, actually. We'd love to drop by, maybe spend the weekend." I paused. "That'd be nice," I said. "I'll put on some coffee." When she hung up, I leaned back and exhaled. Visits always came with a price tag. Maria came in an hour later with a tray of soup. She noticed the smile tugging at my mouth and said, "Good news?" "Company," I replied. "Granddaughter's coming." Maria smiled softly. "That's nice, senor," I chuckled. "We'll see." That Saturday, Megan showed up in a shiny black SUV, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Daniel followed, the kind of young man who introduces himself with a firm handshake and an expensive watch. "Grandpa," she said, hugging me tightly. It was strange. She smelled of perfume and something else I couldn't place. Calculation, maybe. They stayed for dinner. Maria cooked roast chicken with herbs from the garden. Megan complimented everything with that exaggerated politeness of someone auditioning for approval. "This is amazing," she said to Maria. "You're such a great cook." Maria smiled and nodded, then went back to the kitchen. Halfway through dessert, Megan leaned forward. "Grandpa, Daniel, and I were actually thinking of starting a family. We've been looking at houses nearby, but the market is insane right now. I was wondering if you had any advice, or maybe, well, I remember you mentioned that big savings account you kept for emergencies." There it was, the pitch, right on schedule. I set my fork down slowly. "You know, Megan," I said gently, "it's funny how often people remember I exist right around the time they're short on cash." Her face turned red. "That's not what this is about, Grandpa." I just thought, "It's all right," I interrupted softly. "I understand." "I really do." The rest of dinner was quiet. When they left, she kissed my cheek stiffly and said, "You've changed, Grandpa." "I sure hope so," I said. When the door closed, Maria came to clear the table. She didn't say anything, but her eyes met mine for a second, and in that silence, she said everything. The next few weeks were calm again. No calls, no visits, just the house breathing quietly around me. Until Christmas rolled around. Suddenly my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Anna wanted to spend some quality time. Tom, my son, called from Chicago saying he missed the good old days. Even little Brian, who used to come over only to ask for gas money, sent a cheerful voicemail. Maria noticed, of course. They all remembered Christmas this year, she said, with a teasing smile. Yeah, I said. Must have been a strong gust of holiday spirit. She laughed, but I could see the sadness in her eyes, too. She knew what it meant. People rarely come back unless there's something in it for them. Christmas Eve came, and for the first time in years, the house was full again. Anna brought a bottle of wine. Tom brought nothing, and the grandkids brought smiles that looked borrowed from an old family photo. Maria had spent the day cooking, quietly humming carols. When she tried to excuse herself before dinner, Anna said, "Oh no, Maria, stay. You're part of the family tonight." It sounded kind, but I could hear the edge in her tone, the kind people use when they're pretending to be generous. Dinner was loud, full of polite chatter and the kind of laughter that doesn't reach the eyes. I sat there watching them, this strange little performance of togetherness, and I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt distant. Halfway through dessert, Anna suddenly asked, "Dad, we heard from your lawyer the other day. Just some paperwork updates about your estate. Everything okay?" The table went quiet. I met her gaze and smiled faintly. "Everything's fine, dear. Just making sure things are in order." Tom jumped in, trying to sound casual. "You're not changing anything, are you? I mean, we should probably know what's going on, just in case." I took a sip of coffee and said, "Don't worry about it. You'll all find out soon enough. You could have heard a pin drop after that." Maria came to collect the plates, and for a moment I caught the faintest smile flicker across her face, the kind you give someone when you both know a secret. After everyone left, I sat by the fireplace and stared at the flames. The laughter, the false warmth, the greed disguised as concern. It all washed over me like a storm, finally losing its strength. Maria came in quietly, set down a blanket over my shoulders, and said, "You did well tonight," I smiled. "I didn't do anything," she shook her head. "Sometimes not saying what you know is the hardest thing of all." That night, as the house went still, I felt something inside me settle. Like a long battle had finally reached its quiet end. I didn't know it then, but that Christmas would be the last one they'd ever spend in my house, because the next time they walked through that door, it wouldn't be for dinner. It would be for my will. The house felt emptier after that Christmas. Not just quiet, empty. In that way only time can make a place hollow. The days bled together. I'd wake up, make my coffee, sit by the window, and watch the neighborhood move on without me. Kids walking to school, couples jogging, delivery trucks humming past. Life kept happening, whether I joined it or not. Maria still came every day. Same time, same gentle knock on the door before letting herself in. She'd clean, cook, and sometimes when the afternoon sun softened the kitchen, she'd hum songs from her childhood. Those hums were the sound of peace. One morning, she found me sitting at the dining table with a pile of papers, bank statements, property deeds, and the envelope my lawyer had left on the last visit. She paused at the doorway. "Big decision, senor?" I smiled without looking up. Final ones, I think. She didn't press. She never did. That's what I liked about Maria. She gave space the same way she gave care, quietly, respectfully, without asking for anything in return. Over the next few weeks, I wrote letters, long, trembling letters to each of my children and grandchildren. I told them everything I hadn't said. The disappointment, the hope, the love that had worn itself thin but never truly disappeared. And then I wrote one last letter, shorter than the rest. That one was for Maria. She never saw me write it. I did it late at night when the world was asleep and the clock ticked like a heartbeat. I sealed it carefully, slipped it into the folder marked for Maria, and left it on my desk. It was February when my heart finally gave out. No drama, no warning, just a soft sigh in my sleep. Maria found me the next morning, still holding my glasses in one hand, and that old photo of my late wife in the other. The house filled quickly after the news spread. Tom came first, storming in with his phone pressed to his ear, already arguing with the lawyer's assistant. Anna followed, crying loudly, the kind of crying meant for an audience. Megan and Brian showed up last, dressed in black but checking their phones every few minutes. Maria stood in the corner, quietly serving coffee, invisible in her own home. No one asked how she was doing. No one noticed her red eyes. 2 days later, we all gathered in the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The old oak table gleamed under the light, and the air smelled faintly of leather and old paper. My family sat across from each other, stiff, pretending to grieve, but glancing at the folders like hungry birds waiting for crumbs. The lawyer, Mr. Keller, adjusted his glasses and began reading. His voice was calm, deliberate, almost kind. To my daughter Anna, he read, "I leave the silver tea set that once belonged to her mother. I hope it reminds her of gentler days." Anna nodded, trying to smile through tears that weren't real. "To my son, Tom," he continued, "I leave my collection of books and my tools. I know you never cared much for either, but maybe one day you'll understand why I did." Tom frowned. "That's it?" he muttered under his breath. Mr. Keller kept going, unbothered. "To my grandchildren, I leave the family photo albums, every picture, every memory we made together. May they remind you of what lasts longer than money." Megan shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Wait, what about the properties? The accounts?" The lawyer looked up, his gaze calm. "We're getting there." Then he turned the page, and his tone changed slightly. "And to Maria Delgado," he read, "who came into my home as a helper, but stayed as a friend, I leave the house, the land it stands on, and the remaining balance of all my accounts, because kindness deserves roots, and love deserves a place to rest." The room went still. Tom's mouth dropped open. Anna blinked like she hadn't heard right. Megan whispered, "What?" under her breath. Mr. Keller continued, "She has cared for me not because of obligation, but because of heart. And if there's anything I've learned in my last years, it's that true family isn't always born. Sometimes it's chosen." Silence swallowed the room. Maria covered her mouth, her eyes wide. No, Senor Keller, there must be a mistake." "There isn't," he said gently. He was very clear. Tom slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. That woman, she manipulated him." Mr. Keller raised a hand. "Everything was documented, every decision witnessed. He was of sound mind." Anna started crying again. This time it sounded real. Megan just sat there, frozen, her face pale. Maria stood up, trembling. "I never asked for this," she said softly. He was my friend," the lawyer nodded. "He knew that. That's why he left it to you." Outside, the winter light slanted through the blinds, cutting across the table like sharp lines between two worlds, one of blood and one of love. Tom stormed out first, muttering curses under his breath. Anna followed, crying harder. Megan stayed seated for a moment, then looked up at Maria. "He really loved you, didn't he?" she said quietly. Maria wiped her eyes. "He loved all of you, just differently." When they left, the office felt heavy with silence. Maria sat there alone for a long while, staring at the folder with her name on it. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just whispered, "Gracias," to no one in particular, maybe to him, maybe to the air. That evening she went back to the house. The air still carried his scent, faint and familiar. She walked through every room, touching the furniture, the books, the pictures. When she reached the study, she found the envelope. The one marked for Maria, inside, the letter was short. Just a few lines written in shaky handwriting. "Maria, you gave me back my days when I thought I had none left worth keeping. This house is yours now. Fill it with warmth. Fill it with laughter. Don't let it grow cold again. Thank you for caring when no one else did. Your friend, H." She pressed the letter to her heart and sat in his old chair. Outside, the wind moved through the garden, rustling the leaves he used to trim himself, and for the first time in years, that house wasn't empty anymore. It was home. Weeks turned into months after the will was read. The shock in my family's faces that day lingered like dust on an old window pane. I wasn't around to see it, of course, but I can almost picture it, that mix of confusion, anger, and disbelief twisting their features when they realized the money they chased all their lives had slipped through their fingers. I used to think death was the end of one's story. But funny thing, sometimes it's where people finally start to listen. Maria told me later, through the pages of the diary she kept afterward, that Tom came back once. He didn't knock, just stood outside the gate, staring at the garden. The same garden I used to tend every morning while he scrolled through his phone, barely saying hello. He stood there for a long while, hands in his pockets, before turning away. He never came back. Anna, on the other hand, sent Maria a letter, polite, distant, written like a business transaction. She said she understood Father's decision, but she hoped Maria would allow the grandchildren to visit the house one day, for the sake of closure. Maria smiled when she read that. She knew what it really meant. They wanted to see what they'd lost, but she wrote back anyway. "You're always welcome," she said, "if you come to remember him, not to resent him." No one ever replied. In the quiet that followed, Maria made the house her own. Not by changing much. She didn't throw out my furniture or repaint the walls, but by breathing life back into it. The old radio on the kitchen counter played Spanish songs again. The curtains were always open. She planted daisies along the walkway, the kind my wife used to love. Sometimes the neighbors would stop by and ask, "You live here alone now?" And she'd smile softly and say, "No, the house keeps me company." Inside, she framed that letter I left her, hung it in the hallway where the morning light hit it just right. The words faded a little each year, but their meaning didn't. She never sold the place, never rented it. Instead, she turned it into something unexpected. A refuge every Sunday, the house filled with voices again. Children from the neighborhood, mostly kids whose parents worked long hours or couldn't afford childcare. Maria would make them sandwiches, help with homework, and teach them songs her grandmother taught her back in Mexico. The laughter that used to echo in my home decades ago. It came back, just not from the family I'd expected. One summer afternoon, about 2 years later, Megan showed up. Maria was watering the plants out front when she saw her, dressed simply, hair tied back, no fancy car this time. "Miss Megan," Maria said, lowering the watering can. "You came," Megan hesitated. "I don't even know why. I drove past this street and couldn't keep going." Maria nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Come inside. It's still your grandfather's house. Always will be." They sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee from the same cups I'd used for years. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just heavy, filled with everything that had been left unsaid. Finally, Megan whispered, "I didn't come for money." "I know," Maria said. "I just wanted to understand." "Why he left everything to you." Maria looked down at her hands, then back up. "Because I stayed. When everyone else forgot how to?" Megan's eyes welled up. He was good to us. We just didn't see it then." Maria reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "He never stopped hoping you would." They talked for hours. About me, about the years they'd lost, about what really mattered, and how sometimes you only learn it too late. When Megan left, she hugged Maria tightly, something she'd never done before. After that, Megan started visiting once a month. Not for inheritance, not for guilt, just to help. She brought groceries, cleaned the garden, read stories to the kids who came on Sundays. Slowly, the walls between the past and the present began to soften. Maria never told her this, but I think she knew what was happening. Redemption, in its quietest form. Years passed. The house grew older, but it was never empty again. And when Maria herself grew frail, she passed the keys to one of the local kids she'd helped raise, a boy named Luis, who wanted to become a teacher. She told him, "Keep this place open. Make sure it always feels like home to someone." He promised he would. And when she passed, her funeral filled the small chapel with people, neighbors, friends, children, even Megan, who stood by the casket, tears rolling freely this time. The house outlived all of us. It still stands on that quiet street, yellow paint fading under the sun, daisies blooming along the path. If you walk by, you might hear laughter inside, the kind that comes from people who've found safety where they least expected it. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll hear a voice, old, calm, and proud, whispering from the walls, Family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up when you're forgotten. I like to think that's what my story was always meant to teach. Not revenge, not regret, just a simple truth. Love, when given freely, outlasts even death. So if you ever feel unseen, if your worth is measured only by what you give, not who you are, remember this. Kindness doesn't need witnesses. It builds legacies quietly, one small act at a time, and someday, when your name is just ink on paper, someone somewhere might still smile because you cared.